All right.
There you go.
How you doing? Sorry, I thought I'd get back before you let me in. I was just gonna get a sip of water. What's going on? Look how great your space looks.
I
Wow.
wasn't sure if you came in here. Did you get to see it when, or did
Yeah,
we just go
yeah.
to my house? I couldn't remember
We
if we came here and then my house, or what was the what
that's
we
exactly
did.
what we did. Yeah,
Okay.
we were there first,
It,
and
it looks best from this angle.
it
It's like
looked
I'm.
incredible. I mean, I was there. Everyone watching here, it is really nice in person, but it looks exceptional right now in this.
I spent a lot of time working on the frame, man.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't know. This is my little zone here. I mean, it's a bit messy at the moment.
Awesome.
There's stuff everywhere.
How
There's
much do you do at home? Like
it's
how much
always
record? Are you doing tons
always
of
in
recording at
flux.
home now?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I did. So this record I just finished. That's out in October. That yeah, I did the beds. So I did half the beds in Montreal. I did half the beds at the Fogo Island Inn, actually,
Oh wow.
which was crazy. We sort of built a studio there because it was shut down for COVID. So I just asked them if I could go to their hotel and take it over and make a record
Are
there.
you serious?
So I
Had
was
you been there
using it,
before? That's crazy. You didn't
and
tell
they
me that. That's
actually
insane.
they actually said yes. I mean, I know them. I've done some work. I've played
Okay.
some music for them in the past, but I was a little surprised that they were like, "Yeah, sure, go ahead," because I would have taken anything, and I told them that I was like, if you can just let me in one of those artist studios and I could just bring an acoustic guitar and I could sit there for a week, that would be incredible, and it would. But no, we took over the second floor of the incredible, architectural wonder, eco luxury inn, and set up a studio. My friend Mark Feener came and he sort of built a studio. So we used the grand piano they had in this big meeting hall room where I spent most of my time in there, and the drums were in the library, and drums and bass in the library. And then we set up the control room in their like little cinema they have. They have this like 25-seat cinema. So it was it was amazing.
That's so you set up a full. So who played drums and bass? Like who did you bring a band there?
Well, yeah. So because it was all the hotel was closed, and
Yeah.
of course Newfoundland was closed at this point, which is why the hotel was closed. Uh, yeah, I brought in my drummer Liam O'Neill and my producer Marcus Paquin, who also played drums on this session or
Okay.
bass on this section. And they came from Montreal, and we isolated them for our 14-day mandatory quarantine as per Newfoundland regulation, and we spent all 14 days in the hotel, all isolating together. And then
Incredible. They must have loved that too. Like leaving Montreal and ending on Fogo Island to make a record. I mean, come on.
I think it was pretty special, yeah. And we had it catered by some sweet, talented townsfolk cooks there, catered a bunch of meals for us, and I had all the other meals already. I made a pile of stews and things, and so we had the freezer full there, and it was it was pretty sweet. It was pretty memorable, yeah. And unfortunately, because it was the heights of COVID, we couldn't film really anything. We shot a little bit of cameras ourselves to try to tell the story, but and we had one half day at the very end. Our 14 days were up, and we were there for like the afternoon, and then the guys were flying out, and so
Oh, so you couldn't have other people come in and like film,
exactly,
like do all you
yeah,
you had to be isolated together. What a
yeah,
trip, man.
yeah,
And so, how
yeah.
far is it for you to get? You're in St. John, so how to get up to Fogo Island? How long does it take? Did you?
It takes about 6 hours.
Okay.
Yeah, um, it's like a 4.5 hour drive, and then a solid hour and a half ferry, and then the island itself is kind of big. It's like 20 minutes from the ferry
Okay.
to the place to the inn, certainly where we were. Yeah.
Do you think it had an impact on how? I always wonder about this. You know what I mean? Like I think, 'cause like how much the geography taps into the. Sometimes I think it's overblown. You know what I
Oh
mean? Like
yeah,
it's like, oh, I went to Nashville to co-write. Like we always joke about that. You know what I mean? Like you can kind of write a song anywhere. You don't necessarily have to be in Nashville, although there's a lot of great writers down there. But you
yeah.
know, what did you find that the geography? I mean, obviously the pandemic was tied up to it too. But how did you find it change the spirit of the creation?
I mean, yes, I think there is an extent to which it can do that, and I do think that it is. I almost feels like a punchline, like, we did our recording in like an abandoned school. Oh, we did our. It's like, wow, you guys, there's studios you can go to, and they're built just
Exactly.
for this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there was definitely there was limitations to the actual studio situation. The rooms were amazing. The view, I mean, it had to seep in. It's too crazy how beautiful it is there. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen the building, but it's like it's an architectural wonder, sort of big, minimal Scandinavian spaceship sitting in the middle of the just barren rock of Joe Bat's Arm there in Fogo. And so out the windows, and there's just like these vertical slat windows everywhere. It's just rocks and the North Atlantic, and a few little islands, and so it's, yeah, always windy and very private, and sort of kind of feels like the end of the earth a little bit. A little, yeah. It feels isolated, and like you say, it's sort of a pandemic record, and there's a lot of isolation in it. So it worked out well. It was frustrating sometimes. The power situation there apparently is some ancient undersea cable bringing power from the mainland,
Right.
and we had every now and then all the gear would just go, and we'd have to turn everything off, and
It's
hope for
good to have
that.
limitations, man. It's good to have some limitations, you
Yeah, we
know.
lost a couple days because of that,
Oh
but
wow, okay, okay,
yeah,
that's a bit tricky.
we had like four different generators, just gas generators to the hands there. And we couldn't go help them. We were there. Anyway, it was kind of, yeah, it was kind of a crazy experience. I don't know if it. I don't know if you can hear it on the recording, but I certainly
But you
see it
felt it,
in my
yeah. Well, I
mind
mean that matters. That
when I
matters. I
hear the
love the
song.
distraction-free element too. You know what I mean? I think that's different. Do
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like when you finish making the record, you're still with the people you're making the record with. Do you see?
yeah,
Like when you're done recording for the day, you're still in it. You're in this experience. You're
yeah,
locked in.
and yeah, it was that.
It's
Uh,
also kind of neat that it's like now it's what many people think of Newfoundland. They think of Foco Island. They actually think of that geography, the severity of that geography, the rocks, the
yeah.
ocean, the North Atlantic, as you said. And you had recently moved. Had you moved back to Newfoundland like when you did this part of the record? Were you living in Toronto at this point, or had you moved back to Newfoundland? Like had you been living in St. John's?
Yeah, no, we conceived of this whole idea from St. John's. Yeah, we
Yeah,
we had
cool.
been back. I guess only about 9 months before we went in and did the recording, but because we moved back, sort of what? Yeah, I don't know if I can say mid-pandemic. I hope it's all over now, but early pandemic, I guess. Yeah, we sort of ran away from Toronto, and the rent, and
Right.
the concentration of people and everything. I've owned this house here for like 16 years or something, and there was someone renting it, and they were leaving, and yeah, we came home for the summer to, like, put a bit of paint on it, and fix it up for the next renters in September, and we were going to spend the summer here, and then we were just, yeah, why would we go back? Nico really loves it here. I obviously love it here. Um, yeah, there's pros and
It's
cons to every place, but I'm very happy here. Yeah,
well, that's what I wonder. Yeah, how has that transition been? I mean, it's different when you. I mean, it's interesting because I have done the same thing. You and I had a similar trajectory, right? Live somewhere else, grow up. You grew up in St. John's, right?
hmm
And then you left for many years. You live in Toronto, and then I was living in Halifax. Now I'm home in Fredericton, living in the same town that I grew up in. But I think overall it's been really positive for me. But how is it? How does it feel for you? How does it feel for you to kind of go back through the steps of your childhood, see the people of your, your deep past? I don't know if that's happening to you. It probably is.
Well, I mean, I was only in Toronto for like 4 years, I guess.
Okay.
I spent all the Heroes Edda years here.
Okay.
I did live in Montreal for 4 years, when I went to university, which is a full lifetime ago. Um, so I've reckoned with those, yeah, those all of your memories sort of haunting around you all the time. I've dealt with that for quite a while. And it's interesting when you tour a lot, and which we did a lot of in the Heroes Edit days. It was like more often than not we were on tour somewhere. You, I think you have like a, I wouldn't say, I mean, you have a unique perspective, I could say, on the place that you live in because you're constantly leaving it and coming back to it, especially coming back to it, and like you greet it newly every time you come back to it. And you've been in other places with these other energies all around you. And then you come back to this place, and St. John's is like a very unique place. I mean, as is Fredericton, everywhere kind of is, I guess. But I just, I'm so, yeah, I sort of came into contact with the energy of this place freshly so many times over the years. You're like, this is where I live, hey? Like, huh? Like this place is a little strange, actually. Yeah. And now I'm sort of used to it again because I haven't really gone anywhere in a long time.
Yeah. I think
But
you're totally right. I think about my dad. He traveled all over the world. He used to take students on these trips, traveled all the time.
mm,
And I think part of that was why he ended up actually he loved Fredericton. He loved it. He loved traveling. He loved leaving Fredericton, but he also loved coming back because he did have that same kind of greeting it as a unique place, as a unique kind of environment, different energy. And I kind of feel the same way. I feel like having left is very different. It does make you
yeah,
experience the place and see its uniqueness. As you said, St. John's is unique. It's actually unique in the whole world. There are very few places like that. And if
yeah,
you're always in it, you don't necessarily realize that. It's only when you leave and come back.
yeah. When you're from here, it's your baseline, and then when you leave all the time and you tour throughout Canada, throughout the U.S. and Europe, and you come back, and you're like, this place is really on the fringe of North America, like literally and figuratively. Uh, but in a way, it has such a richness that I think punches above its weight. There's like such a cultural richness here that you don't really get in Ontario. I mean, there's all these other benefits from in Toronto, but yeah, there's something very rich about
Yeah,
here.
what is it that some of the things that kind of strike you when you're back or now that you've been back? Like, what are some of those moments that strike you as being particularly unique? Do you have any in mind that you see something and you go, man, I don't think I would see that elsewhere?
I mean, there's the look of the place is fairly unique, I suppose, in terms of what you would see. For me, a lot of it is what you hear, even. Um, just the way people speak is so different. The obviously the accent. I was playing softball with my brother last night, which he's on a very serious softball team, and I was a spare called up, and I went nervously. Anyway, I did all right, but there's such a like. It felt immediately so familiar to me from my youth to have just just all these you know all these guys I want to say, but really they're buys, the buys, right?
Yeah.
And like when you have a group of buys like that, they all talk in the same sort of way, and there's this is like immediately recognizable sense of humor that everybody shares, this way of speaking that everybody shares, and it's so different from being in a big city, a big multicultural city where you never know where everyone is, where they're from, how much they understand of your worldview and your sense of humor, and there's a beauty in that, in like giving space for everybody. But there's also a very different beauty in like being with your people and speaking this very specific argot in this specific accent, and it just is so unique and it feels so different. I mean, it feels a little bit similar in Ireland maybe, but but it's yeah, it's the way that people sound and the sort of the things that they say. There's like this agreed upon sort of sense of humor
Right.
that exists
It's
here.
almost like a rhythm. You know what I mean? It's almost like the rhythm of the conversation flows a certain way. You know what I mean? And when everybody is aware of that rhythm, it just moves. It moves and kind of it's almost like
Yeah.
compounded. I talked with Rini about this. One of the first conversations I had was about North Preston, how unique North Preston is in Nova Scotia. The oldest black community in Canada, isolated, and because of that isolation, and it has developed a particular way of speaking as a community. They speak amongst themselves differently than they speak with me.
Right.
There's a comfort in the family and in members of the community that there's a rhythm to the speech, and they always talk about how when they go over the bridge, there's a little tiny bridge that connects basically to Dartmouth, towards kind of like to Dartmouth essentially. And once you go over that this tiny little stream river, then they change the way they speak.
Wow.
It's
Cool.
actually fairly sad in many ways. You think that this is kind of how they were taught to kind of like, okay, now it's time to adjust our speech so we can fit in and so we can make
Yeah.
it work in this world because our home world is isolated and not looked upon the same ways. Do you find
Yeah.
that when you are operating in Toronto, for instance, do you find yourself dialing back the Newfoundland cadence?
Code switching. I mean, yeah, without a doubt.
You
I
do,
mean,
okay.
even now, and I'm not ashamed of it. I sometimes I used to feel like weird about how I would sort of my accent would leave and then it would get diluted and then it would come back stronger depending on the situation. I mean, I was at my full height, like fully robust accent last night on the softball pitch. I can assure you. Um, but it, life. I mean, communication is about being understood, and that's I do code switch all the time to make myself
Yes.
understood and to show someone that I'm understanding them, basically. So it feels strange to me to like launch into some, you know, fast talking jokes that people aren't going to understand. There's no point. you
Yes.
know.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So
Oh,
yeah,
that's fascinating. But overall, feels good to be home.
feels good to be home. Yeah, and yeah, we launched into this whole thing talking about recording in this room, and I do yes. So I did the beds in Montreal and in Fogo, and then I did all the overdubs in this little room. Yeah, I had. Yeah, I actually had like a big screen for isolating horn players and singers, so they wouldn't have to like breathe each other's air too much because
Well,
the
you had a
whole
COVID
thing
COVID
was
friendly
recorded.
operation.
Yeah, and so we had the window open, and we couldn't do it during rush hour because the road is a little loud sometimes. But yeah, so there's lots of like birds chirping and stuff all through the tracks. Goes,
Yeah. Wow.
yeah, yeah, and then slowly I could take the screen down, and people were like, "No, it's totally fine. You know, everyone's vaccinated." And then we had so we did some strings and horns and winds and lots of singing all over the record in this little room, and of course all of my stuff, me,
All your
shouting,
vocal parts and stuff too.
trying to play lead guitar, yeah, and yeah,
So great, man. I mean, we've talked about this before, but like, what always strikes me when I listen to your records, great arrangements, great musicianship, always. But your voice is such a powerful instrument, and I will say, like, you have the best like scream. You can like let it rip your voice. You can let your voice rip, like the same way McCartney can. Like he goes into that great growl, which is still
yeah,
really musical, but like breaks up and can get really intense. It is something that my voice does not have. I don't have that gear. When I hit it hard, it either just like explodes or it breaks my voice. So I've always been really I admired that. So I remember the first time I heard you guys play, it was at the Atkinson Center in Fredericton, the ECMAs. It was years ago. It was Hey Rosetta. And it was like, this big high chorus and you're singing way up there. And I was like, oh my God, this band is going to be huge. And you were, you know what I mean? And now you're continuing in your own solo work. Like, when did you discover that gear not just singing voice, not just like pretty, because you do have a really pretty voice. But what always amazes me is that you can kind of go from pretty to like the kind of raunchy gear, if you will, the rock and roll gear, the scream, the kind of like relentless energy. I think it really speaks to also the writing and the spirit of the music too, which is this it's quite alive. There's a real life to your music, and when you go into that gear, you feel the life take over the music, if that makes sense. But I love that. I absolutely love that about your voice, that you have that place that you can go there.
Thank you. I didn't know. This is nice. I like this show. This is good.
Well, I mean, I tried it. Well, I just was like, what I do basically before I do this, I'm like, I'm listening to the music. I don't really think about what I want to talk about, but I listen to music and I'm like, well, what really strikes me about this? And I'm like, well, I really love the writing, but there's this particular ability that I think adds to, again, the breadth of emotion that you're able to express. And it kind of can gear up into this place where it's almost like full life, if you will, out of control. It's not, you can go to like a controlled voice where it's very precise and poetic, and you're speaking right to me. And then there's the point which life kind of takes over, the passion of the note, and it opens up. That's a really powerful, powerful thing to listen to. I think it's been there since Hey Rosetta. I think it's in your solo work. It allows a huge dynamic range. Like where does that come from? Has dynamics in music always been a huge part of what draws you towards it? Because dynamics are big for you, quiet to big moments.
Yeah, that was definitely a lot of what defined Hey Rosetta. Certainly, I for a long time. Okay, that's several questions. Uh, for a long time, I was obsessed with trying to do everything in every song, and trying to be as become all the way down to nothing, and to have it be this big dramatic climax, and have it sort of groove kind of cook. And so a lot of the early Hey Rosetta stuff was like, oh, it's a ballad. Oh wait, no, it's like an opera. Oh wait, no, it's like a dance rock ending now. And just because I was sort of trying to craft the perfect song that had everything in it. And then I grew up a little bit and realized there is no such thing as that. And sometimes things are just perfectly simple, and it's just one song can just be one thing. It just can kind of cruise along, and it doesn't need to be this vaulting dynamic leap all the time. But there is something very impactful about doing that. I mean, and you feel it as a performer, certainly. So I think that's what leads me to do that and to keep doing that and to sing in that way, is that it just feels really good to do that. And it feels, yeah, like you move outside your quotidian sort of calm, like got it all together guys, and you, yeah, sort of get in touch with some deeper power that you have inside you. And so, I mean, I've screamed for a long time. That's, in a way, it's like just the '90s creeping through into my music.
Oh,
Because
really?
I grew up in bands, and I played in punk bands and like heavy, not like metal really ever, but I had, we played some heavier stuff in some of the early cover bands. But I had my first like original. Oh, geez, I mean, I guess that we were making songs way back in the first few bands. But I had a band in high school that was like, it was pretty much like we were just trying to be Pearl Jam, essentially.
Okay.
It was like, I mean, we didn't cover them, but all of our originals sounded exactly like Pearl Jam.
And you growled.
And because that's what I
Yeah,
listened to.
yeah,
I mean, I listened
yeah.
to Soundgarden and Nirvana, and obviously, yeah, Pearl Jam, and punk stuff too. And so that was how men sang, kind of, in the '90s. I remember hearing the Tragically Hip for the first time, and I was like, wow, it's like very straight and like clear, pure tone. It's kind of weird, like everything was this screamy, Yeah,
Distorted. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and so that's how I learned to sing. I mean, I was also in choir and stuff, so I knew how to sing other than that. But that's how I sang when I was trying to be cool with my friends. And so, and it felt really good. I mean, it felt really good to do a good Zach De La Rocha impression.
Okay.
And that was very fun. And people thought it was cool and say that's what you keep doing when you're like a teenager. You do what people think is cool, I guess. So yeah,
When you're a teenager. I
it
like
was
how you
some,
say when you're a teenager, as if it
only
doesn't
then.
continue.
And then you
Only
go out of
then.
it. Yeah. I don't care what people think anymore.
But you did sing in choir too. So
Yeah.
you've always had both of these gears.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, it was funny. I mean, yeah, I played piano since I was very, very young, and that was always there. And then I was in choir very, very young. And then, yeah, in high school, I definitely had these two gears. My homeroom was the music room, and so I spent a lot of time there. I would just like play piano during homeroom, and people would just hang out. And I just play piano all the time. And then yeah, and then sometimes there was choir practice at like 7:30 before school, and you have to go in early and like do choir practice, which seems insane to me now that we did that. But then at lunch, I'd be out on the side of school like skateboarding and like just getting high and everything, and uh, it was yeah. I lived in both of those worlds there quite happily.
That's so great.
Yeah,
Also
yeah,
interesting that one didn't affect. That's actually part of it, just even from a mechanical perspective, that one didn't put the other one at risk. You know what I mean? The kind of growl, heavy singing didn't actually affect your other voice.
yeah. I did. I mean, I used to lose my voice all the time.
Okay.
Early Hey Rosetta days, yeah, I would just lose it because I didn't want to like hem it in and like half sing. To me, the whole point was to bring everybody with you. Uh, and yeah, I've always had a bit of a self-sacrificey kind of compulsion when it comes to performing for people. Um, I mean, how many shows have you done like when you feel sick, but you just do it because
So
you
sick.
yeah you
So
have to,
sick. So many shows. No,
so many
absolutely. I was
shows.
just thinking about that recently because I got sick. And then I
Yeah,
was like, I think I probably like I probably would have done a show. Like had I been on the road and this was
yeah,
3 years ago or 4 years ago, I definitely would have got on stage. Like it just shows how much we would have.
yeah.
I remember like you walk off stage and you're shaking.
Oh,
You're just
so
a
I mean, I used
complete
to
mess.
destroy myself. Yeah, all the
Hmm.
time. Yeah, and then but there's some power there that like can get it just gets you through. And it even if it's yeah, you can tap into that. I mean, the last time I don't know if it was the last time I played in Fredericton. It might have been at the church there, Wilmot.
Yep.
I ate some bad sushi and threw up. Like when I was supposed to go on stage, I was in the bathroom throwing up, and Zach was like, "Are you okay in there?" Uh, and I was like, "No, no," but went out there 30 seconds after barfing, and played the show, and it was fine. You know, a little hungry, obviously, but it was fine. It just the adrenaline kind of picks you up.
Well, I think the
But
weird thing is that it's going to.
yeah,
Right?
I
Like you get
know.
used to it. You rely on it. In fact, you're
I've
like, oh,
always said
you know what? Like I will be okay because I know that there's this thing that will carry me through.
there's some part of me, though, some Boy Scout part of me that doesn't want to rely on adrenaline.
I
You
know.
need to be prepared as well, but it does work. It's a hell of a drug.
It's crazy. It is. I mean, it is because if you didn't have that show, you would have been in the bathroom the whole night,
Yeah. Yeah,
right? Like
exactly.
it would have just been a nightmare for hours and
Rolled up on the
hours.
couch or whatever. Yeah. So yeah. But to get back to, I used to throw my voice out all the time.
Okay.
Just get caught up in that wave of adrenaline and just leave it all there. And I went to a vocal coach in Burlington named Mitch Seekins, who sort of saved my singing career, kind of. And as he had saved Hoxley Workman's before mine, that's who put me onto him. And very simple, just technique. I mean, he was kind of like Sinatra kind of crooner guy, and he could sing opera and stuff too. Um, Great voice, obviously, and just it was just do these warm ups, do these um, yeah, just these run through these techniques, and think about this while you're singing, um, and don't worry about it. And most of it was like, don't worry about it.
Right.
Like, your voice is never gone quite as bad as you think it is. A lot of it's mental. Like when you have a really sore throat, you can still totally sing. It doesn't affect your vocal cords at all. Which is nice to keep in mind because you always have a fucking sore throat when you're touring, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah, yeah. That's right.
And he was like, yeah, people don't eat, dairy and all this. He's like, man, I could eat a bowl of ice cream and then go sing an opera. It doesn't matter. It's all in your head. I
Right.
was like, okay,
I
cool.
had
And
similar advice. It was quite similar. It was mostly about like posture and stress. A lot of it was just about
it's
how much I
tension.
was tension in here. Yeah,
Yeah.
which was interesting. Yeah, because I always thought I'm this. I mean, everybody's the same way. When you see a great show, they don't let any. You don't want to, as you said, you don't want to be holding anything back. You want to be able to go full tilt. You want to be able to let it all out.
Yeah, you do. I mean, yeah, I certainly, and I do know how to pace myself a bit better now. And you can sort of flirt with the edge. And so, your voice is worse than it was at the beginning of the show, but you'll be able to get it back for the next show, the next day, sort
Yeah.
of, hopefully. But it's a tricky thing to do. Certainly, like the last show of the tour is always good fun because you don't have to save anything.
Yeah,
So,
right. Yeah, yeah. I also I want to go back to something you said because I thought it was so interesting. Just speaking about development as a songwriter now, like through the years, from this I had never even thought about that. The idea that like every song was tried to be everything. It was as if you were trying to write one song. I think about that a lot. I think everybody in some ways when they start, in fact, they have one song that they're trying to write. And some people
mm,
don't ever move on from that song. That they continually are aiming for the same kind of target. Maybe it's a
mm,
feeling, maybe it's a dynamic. You know what I mean?
I love that. Yeah.
And so that really struck me when you said that because I was like, yeah, man, I really relate to that. I think I hear it too in a lot of people's music. So what changed over the years that you was it that you realized that you were going to be in it longer, that you could do more with less, that it didn't have to do everything? Like what was that process like?
That's a good question. I mean, partly I think it was my own taste changing. I mean, we're talking about a long period of time. It's like almost what are we? We're getting on to like 16 years, 17 years here. So um, that the river of music that you swim in has changed, and you get carried along. Um, and but certainly, what felt satisfying to me for a long time was sort of aiming towards this one. That's so astute. Yeah, like there was one kind of song that I was trying to write that somehow summed up like how urgent everything is and how like disappointing and hard everything is, but ultimately hopeful and beautiful if you grasp it the right way at the right time. And that time is fleeting, but it's good, and we should be here for it. And that was the song I tried to write like 30 times. And of course, that song had to have all these different movements in it because it's all these different ideas that are in conflict with one another, but the conflict is beautiful. And so yeah, that is a thing that I definitely tried to do for a long time. I never really thought about that till right now, but as you get older, you realize like, oh, maybe this one John Prine song is the perfect song, and it's just very specific and simple, and you begin to see that like you don't have to do everything all the time, essentially, and everybody knows that life is disappointing and urgent, in turn, and sometimes you could just write a song that's just like a little meditation on how a piece of broken bottle looks just like a diamond ring or something, and that's enough. That's perfect. I don't know.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I loved your synopsis of the song that you were trying to write. It's strangely like kind of perfect.
Yeah.
But you got to wonder, and it also just like it does make me think. There's a, and I'm not gonna get this wrong, but there's a really famous Japanese poem that's it's a simple image of a frog jumping into a pond,
Hmm.
and they talk about the purpose and the reason it's so powerful is not because the frog jumped in the pond, but because the poem puts a frame around this moment. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
more like, and over time, we get a bit more aware. Sometimes I wonder if it actually isn't because we start working against the urgency. There's so much urgency in our 20s.
Yeah, and that's sort of what I was just thinking about. Like that was a real time of my life when everything felt so urgent, and everybody's going around so distracted and so stupid. They're not getting it. The how important and urgent it is. And I'm actually taking notes here because I really like that frame. Am I allowed to take notes during
Yeah,
this?
you could, yeah.
Um,
But I think that, it speaks to this idea that once we actually step back from some of that urgency to observe, the 20s are about urgency. It's all about that. That's what it feels like. It's that burst of creativity, of being alive, as you said, disappointment, and it's everything at once. Everything at once. And then as you start to breathe a little bit more, you realize that maybe you're going to be fortunate enough to have a long life. Urgency starts to take a different, it looks different.
mhm. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you are framing these what can seem like everyday. I remember looking at songs when I was in my 20s that now I look at very differently now, as you said, like a John Prine song or any type of song that may have seemed too specific.
Hmm.
I didn't relate to it. I related to big, big messages. And as I get older, you read Robert Frost or something, and it's like a bird landed on my windowsill today. You know what I mean? And like, and you're like, yeah, exactly.
That's very true. It feels, you know, you can immediately tell. In a way, it feels like you can tell how old any sort of poet is by the poems they write. Like a high school poem, and in the 20s, it's full. Yeah, it's filled with so much urgency and like just like you. It's just like that whole decade felt like you're just going around yelling at people to wake up or something. Uh, and then now it's still there. That's still there. I still want people to wake up, actually, but and I want myself to wake up. Um, but it just kind of chills out a bit, maybe.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't think you can lose. I don't think you want to lose that. I hear that for sure. The waking up, maybe it
Mm.
turns inward. At least for me, it's probably turned inward. And part
Yeah,
of waking up to me, I think, just from a spiritual perspective, is actually being more aware of those little moments.
yeah, yeah.
You know
And I
what I
think,
mean? When
yeah, I
urgency
think,
starts to die down, then I feel like I'm actually more. I feel like I'm listening. This is going to get a little, uh, airy fairy maybe, but like I find myself. Maybe we were just talking about this when we were walking in the woods a couple weeks ago. Like I'm hearing things that I've never heard before. I'm
mm,
hearing birds that I never paid attention to before.
hmm.
I'm noticing colors on trees that I didn't notice it before. Part of it, so in some ways, I'm waking up to these things because I'm less frantic.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be less distracted. I'm less frantic. But
Or perhaps you've given up spending all your time trying to solve things that you can't
maybe.
fix, you know? And then you're just like, yeah, you're waking up to this this specificity that you used to not pay attention to. Because I think what you said a minute ago, yeah, like I used to try to write songs that were very general, and very like open, uh, and yeah, was always a little afraid of being very specific for some reason. I mean, obviously, I always appreciated that thing where you impregnate the specific with a larger idea or emotion or theme or something. But now it almost feels like you don't even need the big thing there at all. Just put a frame around the frog and you're good, you know?
Yeah, that blew my mind. That blew my mind. That expression, that whole explanation
Yeah.
of that Japanese poem, really, like it kind of did. It made a lot of sense. It really made a lot of sense. It's just like, but it also makes you realize that you. I mean, you also spoke to this idea of like, well, it was only after you were trying to write the great universal song that had everything in it, both musically and metaphysically, and in realizing that that was an impossibility,
Mm.
like that one cannot do that in a single frame. You know what I mean? Like that, I think that's the other thing that takes place. You might start with these big general songs, but then you realize that you're still not able to encompass the great mystery of life, no matter how general the song is.
Exactly. Yeah. And you, yeah, you have to just chill out a little bit, you know?
Do you find your songs getting shorter?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, that was the other thing. All every track. I mean, our records were all like 60 minutes long, and because everything had to have an intro and a different outro, and the big halftime section, and so yeah, getting a lot shorter. This, I mean, this record. I managed to put out a record that only has 10 songs on it, which I've never done before. Feels like so few,
So
but
this is minimal. Well, you love the Beatles, right? So you're like probably dedicated to the 14 song kind of
yeah, which
perfect
but you
record.
can't do that when all your songs are like 5 minutes long. You know? Yeah, yeah, she's a little slimmer. I mean, I really, I had a hard time cutting the 11th song, but
Okay.
uh, it, oh, I mean, the track listing, what a struggle. I mean, do you obsess about this as much as I do? It took me like 3 weeks to come up with the track listing. Like,
It's
oh,
the weirdest thing. I always have, to the most extreme extent. And if you ask Nina, she would laugh at me if I said that I don't. But like, I did less on my last record than I ever have. It was almost a I just kind of like, it all happened quickly. The
oh, that's
name of
nice.
the record, the whole thing. And in
Oh
some
yeah.
ways, I think it's one of the strongest records. It was the weirdest thing. Like, I tried to get out of the way because I've gotten in the way of everything. If that make like I can just make the smallest decision the biggest. You know what I mean? I know how to do it.
All too well.
And so like yeah, I get you, man. I've done it. I mean, I remember spending weeks listening and then printing off. You know, when you used to be able to print off print off the CD, then switch up the order and then listen to the full CD, and then someone would interrupt you at like track 7 and you'd have to start again at track 1 because you had to feel the flow from.
Yeah. It's really time consuming. I mean,
I don't know if it's fiction though.
you can only
Sometimes I
listen
wonder
to
if it's
one
is
record.
it fiction?
No, I don't think so. I think it is important actually,
Yeah,
but
it has to be.
um, less than
Details.
ever. Less and less important every year probably because I don't think very many people listen to full records these days. But I think it does inform how people get to meet the record, and that's always been really important to me. I don't know, just because it seems like such a big difference. Like the whole record shifts if you change the first two songs.
Yes.
It's like a completely different record. And quite frankly, the way music writers write about records and the way reviews are done, they usually when they say this is this record that sounds like this, it's usually the first three songs that sound like that or speak to that. And then that's enough to define what it is. Like that's the frame then.
Well, I think what's challenging though is to know what your parameters are for making those decisions. So it's not to say like that the decisions aren't important, but it's also to then be able to step back and go, okay, well, what am I factoring in when I'm making that decision? Because I think maybe there was part of me that's making a decision from this place, which is the arc of the record, and then there's this other place which is like, well, I know they're only going to listen to 2 songs, so I'm going to stack the first two. So be it with the momentum. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Like,
That's why it's so time consuming because you're trying to achieve two or three
that
completely separate goals by this with the same list, you know. Uh, but I love it. I mean, I hate it and I love it. It's like
I like to think about Full Moon Fever if Zombie Zoo was the first track instead of Free Falling or whatever.
right. I mean,
Different experience.
it seems like such a like, oh, that doesn't matter. Stop worrying so much, but I think it does matter actually.
It does, I know, but I don't. I'm trying to at least tap it. Maybe this is totally foolish, but to work kind of quickly is to work on that like instinct, trust that like whatever my initial feeling is strong. Because I just feel like the part I'm saying about getting in the way is that then I start to then like put a whole bunch of equations and then it turns into this crazy impossible Jenga that it won't satisfy the five or six kind of stipulations that I've created. And so that's what I'm trying to move a little quicker through some of those things. It's a fine balance, but I think it's because I also was one to just over edit, overthink, and I don't know if it affected. I watch my kids color.
Yeah.
It's like a lot. And there's this
Yeah.
moment when they know they should stop. I know that, the thing is done. And what inevitably happens is they grab the next color and they start going at it again. And then they know they're like, it's ruined. And you're like, it's such an amazing thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I watched them do it. And I'm like, yeah, believe me, dudes. That I know that. I am that.
Daddy does that for a living.
I do that for a living.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder, it sounds to me a little bit like what we were talking about in terms of songwriting and just this gradual chilling out as you get older. And sort of, yeah, being a little shooting from the hip a bit more, just being more accepting of what you create, what you like, what feels good, what you want to create, and not what you think is going to be good. Um, and it sounds like wisdom a little bit, but I also don't fully trust it.
Well, I know because it's because you also know, and you've had likely many experiences that in fact your first instinct on something, maybe lyrically or musically, wasn't the best
Exactly.
that an edit, that a late edit to a verse was a game
Yeah.
changer.
It's really the combination of those two hats.
Yeah.
You have to let the things come out freely without judging them, and then later you got to come back with that other hat on and be like, this sucks, this is dumb, this is cheesy, this is cool, and
Yeah.
just slash a little bit.
Yeah. It's this, the outward energy to the focus energy.
Yeah.
It's unless you do this at first, if you start in this narrow place, you're doomed.
Yeah, you'll never
You
make
won't,
anything.
you won't make anything, and everybody knows being in that situation and knowing other people in that situation where you've edited yourself before you've even started.
Hmm. Yeah, that's death.
But
And then the other way is, you can't be too easy on yourself either.
mhm.
You just let it all sort of flap in the wind.
I like that. I mean, being easy on yeah. You can't be too easy on yourself. I was trained to be really hard on myself.
Yeah.
And I maybe, like I had strict parents. It was a strict environment,
Mm.
high, you know what I mean? Like all about kind of like major measures of success. I've had
Right.
a hard time kind of determining that for myself now. Like how do I remain ambitious but not be quite so hard at myself so I'm not unable to do it. I mean, you can get so hard on yourself again that you will shut down
Of
or that you
course.
will be so nervous that you can't move forward. So I think part of it is also like, but I don't want to lose the ambition. To
Hmm.
talk about another like contradiction, right? Is like, how do you stay ambitious but tie yourself to a different pace or a different rhythm, or even for you living in St. John's instead of Toronto. Toronto's where ambitious, you know what I mean? Like Toronto is that's what ambition looks like in the music industry. It means going to a bigger city. Do you know what I mean? It means for many of us,
Yeah.
right? Like many on the East Coast, it's like, okay, we move to a bigger place. And I think that part of it is like, okay, well, what does ambition look like now? Well, I got two kids, so that changes things. What is it now? I'm living in a smaller town, and and I'm probably going to tour a little bit less. But what does that look like? So I think redefining ambition's been interesting, really interesting for me. Do you feel as ambitious now as you did as a 20-year-old?
Um, that's a good question. I feel. I mean, I have so much information that I didn't have before, so it's hard to separate that. Like, there, I mean, if I was, 22 or 23 or wherever I was when I started Hey Rosetta, I would still do it all again, even though I know bringing a seven-piece band all over the world is impossible. uh, no one's going to make any money, and we're all going to be so exhausted. It's going to take years to recover. And yeah, I'd still do that for sure. Um, and in a way, I would do it so much better because I wouldn't be quite so precious about it, and maybe a little less ambitious. But uh, yeah, ultimately, like ambition can kind of screw you over. I feel like from enjoying something, obviously, but also even like from being successful at it.
Mm-hmm.
Because the stakes are so high for you to fulfill this like impossible sort of dream that you have, this impossible task you have for yourself, that yeah, you may never. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it changes shape a little bit, doesn't it? Your ambition as you get older. Right now, my main ambition is to buy a piece of my neighbor's yard
Okay.
and build a little studio out there.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah, it's so
That's pretty
great.
simple.
Well, it's simple, but again, it's real. I mean, it's just really interesting. It's like you said, it's you take when you think about the song, when you think about what we were talking about songs, you think about those big ambitious goals that you set. You kind of need them. That's what fires the whole thing up. It's like you said, like you don't want to lose the fire. You don't want to lose that. Wake up, people. Life is crazy. Life is a mystery. It's
Hmm.
amazing and terrifyingly sad at the same time. That and this idea, like I want to write it all in one song. World domination. I want a seven-piece band that will take over the world. I want to be able to write one song that has everything. You know what I mean? And it can destroy you when you start to realize that those grand visions are not. It's not that they're not realistic. It's that they, as you said, they change shape very drastically. Maybe it's because you realize that what you have in your mind is actually not a real thing or is an impossibility because it is.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
I mean, maybe we weren't ambitious enough.
Mm-hmm.
That's possible too. Maybe we played it safe on a too many of those million decisions that we made over those years.
Right. Not enough sacrifice.
Well, yeah. I mean, the music industry is a mysterious thing. It's like any business thing. Like, it's part luck, it's part timing, and it's part devotion, and it's part risk, and maybe if we'd taken what meager resources we'd had and like put it into one great music video or something, or like one crazy tour production thing that would have broke the bank, but would have been so memorable and so memorable to so many people. I don't know. You know.
Yeah, yeah, I do. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting. I go there. I do go there. I think about okay, what would have happened, but then part of me is like, yeah, but ultimately, it's more just about It's more about just being able to still do it.
Well, that's what
It's
my
kind
ambition is. That's what I mean. Like I want to build this place so I can make my next 5 records.
exactly, which
You
is
know.
super ambitious. I think
Yeah,
that's
it
what, and
is.
I've talked about this a lot. This is part of the reason why I like these conversations the most. Is like, okay, now once you go through that first 5, 10, even 15 years of having this huge idea, what happens after 15 years when not all of those things are realized? What are you left with? How do you then continue on to the second decade, the third decade? What does it look like? And
Yeah,
all of a sudden you're talking about these, as you said, well, they seem small, having a little piece of land with the studio, but at the same time, you're like, that's the best.
yeah.
It's
Because it's a
huge.
gateway to the real dream for me, which has always been the music and just like experimenting with music. I mean, that's been the flashpoint for the whole thing, you know.
Is being free to create.
Yeah, and not being so distracted and exhausted from being on the road or uh, doing like interviews on Zoom or whatever. No, I'm joking.
These
But
are supposed to fill our spirit, Tim. This is why
you
we
can.
fill. This is
I'm
supposed to
joking. I'm
fill the
joking. This
spirit.
is wonderful. It's wonderful. But you can spread yourself too thin sometimes and lose sight of the whole point, and the food for the whole machine. Mixing metaphors here. It's okay. You know what I mean, though.
And
So
the food being that creative energy, a creative state.
yeah, the music and the time with which to make it, in like in a healthy and free way. Yeah.
Do you think that you're more aware of that now than you were before the pandemic?
Um, I have a very specific kind of. The pandemic is weird timing for me because I had like just finished touring in Europe the sort of the day that the pandemic sort of came to North America. Like I came home and I isolated. Didn't have to yet, just like thought I should. And then when I came out, everything shut down. And so and I was done touring for my record really, and I was like coming home to make a new record.
So your rhythm actually was. You would have naturally had a creative time break
Yeah. I
isolation.
mean, I yeah felt very sort of lucky, if you can feel lucky in the middle of an awful pandemic where people are dying. I it didn't affect me sort of professionally in as profound a way as some of my friends who like just put a record out. If I put a record out 1 year later, it would have been a disaster.
Mm.
But I put my record out in April of 2019, and so I was sort of just finishing a full year of touring that when this struck, and before that record, I sort of had 2.5 full years from the kind of end of Hey Rosetta to so I had a lot of time where I wasn't really touring or doing much to sort of deep dive into what my solo thing could be, what it could sound like, what it could look like, what is my music without Hey Rosetta, like what even is that? And so there was like I did a lot of sort of soul searching and writing, a lot of writing, just wrote in all these different directions to see what felt right. A lot of just dicking around with Pro Tools or Ableton, and so I had like a similar kind of 2 years prior to that record that I had prior to this record in a weird way. I mean, everything else around me was different, but yeah, both those records I was blessed with a fair bit of downtime.
But you've also created that space. You've been protective of that creative. Obviously, then, like previous, I felt like I kind of learned that during the pandemic, and some artists have learned that too. That in fact, you have to create that space. Whereas you had the habit of going, okay, you know what, I need 2 years, or I need time to dig
Yeah,
into what I'm gonna do next, and then, because man, that first record is insane, by the way, so
thank you.
good. I just can't. I mean, I love it so much, right out the gates. right out of the gates. First
Thank you.
track. Great sequence.
Hey, thank you. I worked hard on that one. Lost a few nights of sleep over that one. Thank you. Um, yeah, and I owe you a link for the new one,
Can't
actually.
wait to hear it.
Yes. You sent me yours, and I did not listen to that yet. So this is what we need to do. I need to listen to that. I need to send you a
You
link.
guys just put down a couple more notes in the notebook,
Yep. I'm going to do that right now. Um,
and I'll send you that little that note about the frog jumping in the pond
well, I've made that now.
because
Thanks.
it's wonderful. Well, I'll find you the kind of the place it came from. It's a
The
really
actual.
nice.
Congratulations on your Juno, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, it was cool.
Very
It was
cool.
fun.
You were at
Most
home with COVID, is that right?
yeah yeah. Right after I saw you, buddy, like 2 days after. Yeah, no, it was. Yeah, I was home, but you know what? It went okay. None of us got super sick. It was a good week.
Excellent.
And then I got a weekend home with my kids, and we celebrated. And I didn't expect it at all, but it was nice.
It's great. I mean, yeah, that's very cool. That's very cool. You can put Juno winning in front of your name now, which is
It's
awesome.
just great, And the other thing about it, I think more than anything, is just that like I was trying to shoot from the hip.
Yeah, and you
I was
did.
trying to lean
You hit
on
the
that hip,
target.
and then it's a little bit affirming that like that little
Mhm.
inner voice thing that you want to trust before all the other voices come in. What is sound? That's really like, and it's not that they mean that the Junos are just like the ultimate affirmation, but is that if anything I get from it is like, you know what, that's kind of cool because that was very much a shoot from the hip kind of project, very much like, again, not a ton of time. It wasn't like I didn't stress over a whole whack of things that I could have and would
Hmm.
have.
Cool.
So yeah, no, it was a great experience. I can't
Yeah.
wait to hear your record. I really appreciate you doing this, Tim. Thanks for spending the
Yeah.
time with me.
Pleasure.
I always enjoy our chats.
Yeah.
I hope we get to see each other again soon. And when you come through
Yeah.
Fredericton, or I go to you.
You're not coming to St. John's anytime soon, are you?
Not that I know of until they invite me. So I got to figure out how to get invited.
Uh,
Softball tournament, maybe.
there you go. That's why I just got a text about some of this. So weird. What the hell? There's a million texts here. I'm so confused.
It's the best. And I can't wait to hear more of Nico's record, too. Very
Uh,
excited about that.
that I think you will like very much. We just sequenced that, and she is more free of all my neurotic
Right.
encumbrances. So it was quite painless, actually. That was, but a good sequence and a wonderful sounding record that Josh and I put together for her. Yeah, very exciting. Very exciting.
Awesome, man.
Um, I'll get her to send you that as well.
Please do. Well, thank you. I'm excited for you, man. I'm excited for the next stage. And
Thanks.
thank you. Thanks for taking the time, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, pleasure.
Right on. Talk
See
to you
you
soon.
later.
See you, Tim. Bye.